Welcome to Coach Eichner's Math. Today we'll be talking about isosceles triangles and the special segments inside of a triangle. So the first thing we're talking about is the isosceles triangle. So knowing that it's an isosceles triangle, it is a triangle. An isosceles triangle just happens to have two congruent sides. And because I have two congruent sides, I also have two congruent angles. They're named our base angles, which we should talk about here in just a couple minutes. So looking at example 1. We got two legs. Our legs are always congruent on an isosceles triangle. So in this case, our congruent legs are segment AB and segment AC. Our base is the leg that is not congruent. In this case, it would be segment BC. Our base angles would be the two angles attached to our base. We know that they're going to be congruent angles because they're opposite our congruent sides. That would be angle B and angle C. Our vertex angle is our angle that is between our two congruent sides, otherwise known as angle A. So, if two sides of a triangle are congruent, then the angles opposite them are also congruent. If two angles of a triangle are congruent, then the sides opposite those angles are also congruent. So if AB is congruent to AC, AB is congruent to AC, then angle B would be congruent to angle C. And if angle C is congruent to angle B, C is congruent to B, I'm going to look at the sides across, and I'm going to say that the segment AB is congruent to the segment AC. Okay, so easy thing to look at here. Find the value of x in each. So I know my vertex angle is 30 degrees. Make sure you label that. Okay, and these would be my base angles. We know my base angles are congruent because they are opposite my congruent sides. So if I say 180, total number of degrees in a triangle, minus 30, I have 150 degrees left. Well, I've got two base angles that are congruent, so 2x would equal 150, or x would be 75 degrees. And each base angle would be 75 degrees. Looking over at example number 3. I've got a isosceles triangle turned sideways, so I've got a base angle and a base angle. I know they're congruent, so since the bottom base angle is 40, the top base angle is 40. 40 and 40 give me 80 degrees. So if I say 180 minus the 80 degrees I know about, that's going to leave me with 100 degrees. X would equal 100 degrees. Now, notice this is not drawn to scale. Expect as you're going forward that some of these pictures are not drawn to scale. It is so that we make sure that you are doing the math and not eyeballing your answer. So please make sure that you trust your math. So let's look just a few more examples here. Example number 4. We know that we want to solve for x. Well, I know my base angles are the same, and my base angles are congruent. That means the opposite sides are congruent. So right now, I don't care about the length of my base. That does not matter to me. My two congruent sides I do care about, because anytime I have two congruent sides, I can say those two things are equal. So 2x minus 4 equals x plus 5. I'm going to go ahead and solve for x. Subtract x from both sides. I'm going to add 4 to both sides. That'll cancel. Ooh, that'll cancel. We'll say 2x minus x gives me 1x. And 4 plus 5 gives me 9. So x equals 9. Now if they ask for the length of my legs, I'd just plug it back in. If they ask me for the length of my base, I'd have to plug it into this bottom number that we crossed out. Let's look at example number 5. So right here I have 56 and 62 degrees. Now, in order to figure this out, I need to figure out what my third angle is. And in order to figure out my third angle, I need to figure out what my missing angle is by subtracting. I'm going to say 180. Let me get the calculator on screen for you. I'm going to say 180 minus 56 minus 62, and that'll give me my missing angle. Oops. Helps if you hit minus here. My missing angle is 62 degrees. So right there is 62 degrees, and 62 degrees makes those my base angles, which means that these sides opposite must be congruent. So this is 42, so x must also be 42. Okay. So looking down, we've got a couple new words we want to talk about today. Angle bisectors. Okay. A ray that cuts an angle into two congruent pieces. So if I draw a triangle here, doesn't matter what kind of triangle, and I want to talk about an angle bisector. An angle bisector would be any segment, line, ray that comes in here and cuts an angle in half. In this case, I'm going to use my top angle or my vertex angle, and I now know that these two smaller angles left up there on the top must be congruent because my green ray here would be an angle bisector. Looking at my altitude. Anytime I have an altitude, it means that it is going to be perpendicular from any vertex to its opposite side. So if I want to draw my altitude, I'm going to draw it straight down here, like so, and I'm going to put a 90-degree angle right there. That would be an altitude because it is perpendicular to the opposite side through a vertex. I could also turn my paper, and I could say, well, I've got an altitude that would end up coming out, if I want to make it 90 degrees, okay, I could draw a 90-degree angle from this side up through that vertex, right? How many should I have on every shape? I should have 3 because it is a triangle. So looking at the next one, median. A median is a line drawn from the vertex to the midpoint of the opposite side. So the important thing here is we find the midpoint of the opposite side. We're going to say that these two pieces are congruent, and we're going to draw a line straight through the middle. And that would be a median because it's from the vertex to the midpoint. And again, I could do that on all 3 sides from all 3 vertices. Perpendicular bisector. Now this is a special case scenario, and it has to be 2 things at the same time. A perpendicular bisector, okay, would be a segment that is perpendicular to a side and it is at its midpoint, which means it would be an altitude and it would be a median at the same time. Just draw that straight down. Notice I marked those 2 pieces as congruent. Notice I put a 90-degree angle right there. It is perpendicular to the side at its midpoint. Okay? So each triangle has 3 of these items. So it is important to us to know what we're looking at. So again, looking at example 7, which is our last example for the day. If AF is an altitude, well, an altitude means that I have a perpendicular segment. So right now I'm going to mark it. Okay, that's perpendicular. Find the value of x if the measure of angle 1 equals 8x plus 18. Well, we just told you that it was 90 degrees based on the fact that it's an altitude. So angle 1, 8x plus 18, would equal 90 degrees, or 8x would equal 72. X would be 9. That's all farther they asked us to go on that. So I appreciate you for watching. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.